Hi there, I'm psychotherapist and healer Nani, and this week's message is called The Truth About Addiction. The numbers of individuals struggling with addiction in the United States and around the world are absolutely staggering. It is a massive, massive epidemic, and addiction creates so much suffering in the lives of individuals. It tears apart families. It destroys people's finances and livelihood. And it takes thousands upon thousands of lives every year. And what's more is if we're struggling with addictions, we cannot be free, we cannot be happy, and we will constantly be sabotaging our lives, our well-being, our destiny, and our ability to reach our potential. Now, I want to give you truth about addiction coming from a recovered addict. I am a psychotherapist. I've been doing this for over 20 years, but most of what I've learned about addiction and so many other issues, I've learned through my own journey of struggle and healing. And I'm the type of person, because I think of my calling, I have to go through everything and experience the fullness of the struggle to come out the other end. It's just the way it's been with everything in my life. And my hope is that as I share my story and what I know from a clinical, psychological, scientific, neurochemical background will help other people gain the freedom that I have been able to gain from all of my addictive behaviors. I came into this world an addict. My addiction was dormant, but not for long. I was about 11 or something like that when I got drunk for the first time at a wedding, wasted. As soon as I hit adolescence, I started experimenting with substances. You might have said I was very curious, but I will tell you, I loved to get messed up. And that began my journey with substances and alcohol. Food had been an issue since I was in adolescence. Actually, probably younger. But in adolescence is when it took off. In adolescence is where a lot of our stuff takes off, because it's such a dramatic period in time for us individuals. And I would say for all of us, but girls especially, we're just so emotional. And it takes so many years for a woman to be able to understand and manage her emotions. And trust me, some women never do. And so adolescence hits us hard between all of the neurological changes taking place, the hormonal changes taking place, the pressure from the peer group to be a certain ideal, to be liked, to belong, to be seen, to be desired. Then on top of that, then you have sexual development beginning. No. It is a time of absolute chaos. And that's why everything comes to light in adolescence. But make no mistake, everything that's coming to light in adolescence was brewing already and was already starting to develop at the unconscious level through belief systems and paradigms and concepts and perceptions of self and the world and others, through modeling what we saw in front of us. We're going to see what an important part that plays in addiction. And then, also in adolescence, I started smoking cigarettes, and I smoked like a chimney. Like I said, you guys, I came into the world an addict. It was dormant. And then it was not dormant, and I was in active addiction for many, many years of my life, decades of my life. And then I recovered from addictions. And now I'm an addict in recovery. And then when I die, I will be a recovered addict who never used again or partook of her addictions. Nevertheless, I was an addict. Why do I say that I was born an addict and I'm going to die an addict. Because there are some of us here who have what I call the addict brain. And I am one of those people. And it is not my fault that I'm an addict. It is not my fault at all. It was my responsibility to heal and recover, but it was not my fault. I came in with a faulty brain when it comes to addictive behaviors. If you have the addict brain like me, balance with things that elicit neurochemicals, especially those that elicit dopamine, are going to be a major challenge for you to keep in balance. You know how there are people out there that you just see them eat whatever's on their plate, and then when they're full, they stop eating. You see them have the glass of wine, with dinner. Maybe they order a second one, but they leave half of it because they already start to feel in their body, okay, this drink is already affecting me a little too much. It's not for me. They never get into the drugs. They never get into the smoking. They do everything in a measured way. That's not the addict. And that's not the person with the addict brain. And that sure as hell was not me. If you have the addict brain, you have multiple addictions. If you just have one addiction, then you probably don't have the addict brain. You just went overboard with something and then it created addiction in your brain. And I'm going to explain how all of that happens in either this video or the next, depending on how it goes. But if you have the addict brain, like me, you're addicted to cigarettes, to alcohol, to drugs, to food, to gaming, to gambling. If you have the addict brain, everything that feels good to do a little, you'll do it a lot. If you have the addict brain, you can't handle your consumption with alcohol, even though you've been pretending. You overdo it every time. You use more of a substance than you say you're going to. You say you're going to try to stop. You say you're going to try to curb it. You say you're going to try to decrease it. And you fail every single time. And you tell yourself this is a discipline issue. Guys, addiction has nothing to do with discipline. There's an aspect where discipline comes in recovery. But addiction itself is not a discipline issue. It's a brain problem. This is what I want you to understand from this message. Because if you're an addict, you're never going to beat the brain problem. If we have a problem in our brain, we have to find what the solution is neurologically and work with it, right? Like people with ADHD, there's a dopamine imbalance there. They need to take the medications and then they can focus. But on their own will, they're not going to figure out how to focus because the problem is in their brain. And that's the issue with addicts. And that was me. That is me. I now have a brain that feels normal, but it's because I'm not participating in addictions, addictive behaviors, or the addictive substances that I overdid in my life. So there is a way to get your brain, even though if you have the addict brain, to have a calm, normal brain, but it's through abstinence and other recovering principles and skills. And I'll get into that later as well. But if you have the addict brain, you want more and more and more and more. If you have the addict brain, your brain is always scanning, always thinking, always plotting when it's going to get its next drink, its next drug, its next shopping, what it's going to buy next, what it's going to eat next, depending on your drug of choice. And if you have the addict brain, there's probably a few. I went into AA at the beginning of my recovery. I was in that program for 6 years. I think it's an amazing program, and you learn a lot there. And a lot of people spend their life in AA, and that's them. That's their journey. Mine was not. I'm no longer in AA. I'm sober, but I don't go to that program anymore. But one of the things they say all the time, half jokingly, is, so if you're getting the picture, if you have the addict brain, you feel out of control, and your addictive behaviors are causing problems in your life, in your mental health, in your emotional health, in your relationships, in your finances. Almost every addiction affects finances negatively, and every addiction affects our mental health negatively and our emotional health. Because when you're an addict and you're participating in your behavior or your drug of choice, you get this out of control feeling. And there's a lot of regrets and shame that come from having used the substance and experiencing its consequences, whether it's the day after from drinking or drugging, whether it's how you feel after a week-long binge, having gained 10 pounds in 5 days. Oh, it's possible. Having gone to the casino and gambled your entire paycheck, having spent your entire paycheck at the strip joint or on a prostitute, having nothing to show for the money that you make because of your spending addiction. This is all very frustrating and very disappointing. That's why we feel like shit when we participate in our behavior, even if we're still in the denial phase where we think it's normal and we think, oh, I just need to work on this. I just need to do better. I just need to get a little bit more balance. Everybody else does it. Well, there are a lot of people with the addict brain. And if you have the addict brain, you will not be able to fix your problem through discipline, willpower, motivation, weaning, balance. None of that works for true addiction. You will need to get abstinent from your substance. If it's a substance, if it's a specific food, if it's a specific behavior. For example, I've known people with a masturbation addiction that have stopped masturbating completely. I know people with food addiction that don't eat specific foods that they know are their trigger foods. They just remove them from their lives. They go to Overeaters Anonymous sometimes, sometimes not. People who have a drinking problem have completely stopped drinking. People who have a pot addiction have stopped using pot entirely, etc., etc., etc. Why is abstinence absolutely necessary for addiction when it comes to substances and certain behaviors and certain foods? Because the way that addiction works in the brain, a little is what triggers the craving. It could be a dinner roll of white flour or a dessert that triggers it. It could be one glass of wine or half a glass of wine. It could be 2 tokes from a weed pipe or a pen. It could be the first coin that you put into the slot machine. A little is what triggers the craving. It's what opens the door. So those of you who have the addict brain are not going to be able to do a little. A little is only going to whet your appetite. And we can white knuckle it through will, maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days. But what that usually brings is the chatter starts. The chatter starts about that substance or that behavior, meaning craving. Your mind starts thinking about it all the time. When am I going to get my next drink? When am I going to eat that piece of cake again? What am I going to eat next? You know, when's it going to be 5 o'clock so I can smoke weed? Oh, I got to get to the casino again. No, I'm going to hit the jackpot. It usually starts all of that. And eventually, unless you get back into the mentality of abstinence, that door is open. You're going to eventually slip and lose whatever recovery you had. So I was in AA for about 6 years, 7 years, and I was sober. I was like one of those one-chip wonders that they call in AA. I went in, I stopped drinking, and I never had to have a relapse while I was in the program. And then I left the program because I pursued other spiritual avenues, and I got very involved in my spiritual journey. And, you know, one day I thought, oh man, I'm such a spiritual person. I have so many coping skills now. Like, I'm different. You know, I bet you I can handle alcohol. And one day at a wedding, they served me champagne and I drank it. And that day I was fine. I had 1 glass of champagne. Okay. That very week, I started having a little bit of wine here and there during the week, right? By the way, most of the time, people who don't have a problem with alcohol don't feel the need to drink during the week unless they're out or they went out to dinner. But that whole thing of having a glass or two of wine every day, that's problematic already because these are addictive substances. And so the more you introduce them to the brain, the more the brain gets addicted to them. And so little by little, after I picked up the drink again, it started creeping up and it started creeping up and it started creeping up. And before you knew it, I was getting drunk and that thing had climbed on top of me again. And every day felt like a great day to drink a few glasses of wine. And every weekend felt like a great time to go out and get drunk. And eventually I had to give it up again because it was like, this does not line up with who I am at all. But I found out real quickly what they say in AA all the time, that while you're in the meeting, your addiction is in the parking lot doing push-ups, getting stronger. And that was my experience. And so eventually I had to give up drinking again. And this time, that time when I gave it up the last time, which was already years and years ago, I did it because I wanted to. The first time I went into recovery, I was in an emotional crisis and I quit because I needed to. But this time I quit because I knew I'm completely addicted to this thing. My brain is addicted to this thing. It's not my fault. It has nothing to do with me. The only thing that is my responsibility is that I can't drink because this is what happens to me. So I knew by this point I was no more in denial. I can't handle alcohol and I am completely okay with that. I cannot handle alcohol. I can admit that. I would scream it from the mountaintops if I needed to. And this last time that I quit, it was completely different. Even though my recovery the first time around was very strong and powerful too. But this one had a different flavor. This one was like, oh, I'm so done with this crap. I don't want this thing in my life. This thing is disgusting. Like I developed this like rejection of alcohol that if you told me today, guaranteed you can drink without a consequence and without the addiction taking place, I would say, no, I'm not interested. Ugh. It's like the ick totally with alcohol. The same thing when I quit smoking many years ago. I actually quit smoking cigarettes before I quit alcohol. And that was very, very hard for me. That's another very strong addiction. But I knew because I had seen a lot of people in my family quit smoking and pick it back up again. Quit smoking and pick it back up again. And let me tell you something, quitting smoking is freaking hard. Freaking hard. And I was able to quit and I knew I can never smoke another drag of a cigarette for the rest of my life. Because yeah, maybe at a party I'll take a couple drags and I'll think I'm fine. But the addiction is doing push-ups, waiting for me. And then it's going to be like, oh, next party, I'll have a whole cigarette. Next thing I know, I'm buying a pack of cigarettes and I'm just going to have one a day. But before you know it, I will be back at the same amount that I was smoking when I quit at my heaviest use the last time. So I knew I'm quitting smoking and I will never smoke another cigarette again. So I quit, and that's the same thing. I have the total ick. I'm completely disgusted with when you recover, it's like you change and it creates other desires in you. I distinguish between getting clean, getting sober, getting abstinent out of fear and out of crisis, which is where a lot of us start, which is fine, to then finally now you're clean, you're abstinent, you're sober because you have gained so much of your life back, of your destiny back, of your light back, that you wouldn't even consider screwing that up by bringing that addiction back into your life. That is true recovery. That's where you find your complete safety in recovery, because now it's coming from a desire, not a need. And that's ultimately where we want to go. And usually if you enter into a period of recovery or a lifestyle of recovery, your life changes so much, you fall in love with that life. Just like when you go on a journey of healing, yeah, it's hard as hell, but you fall in love with your life because it's powerful. So this is my story of my addict brain. I will have the addict brain as long as I live. And the only way that I can keep it dormant, that I can control that addict part of me, is through abstinence. Because guess what? The addict brain loves to be messed up, anesthetized, inebriated, or otherwise altered. If you have the addict brain, you want to alter your perceptual experience through the neurochemical releases that addictions bring. But it comes at a very high price, because as an addict, you lose control and everything climbs up on you and everything jumps on your back. And now you become everything's bitch. Because if you're a nicotine addict, you're nicotine's bitch. If you're an alcohol addict, you're alcohol's bitch. If you're a spending addict, you're a spending's bitch. If you're a pot addict, you're a pot's bitch. If you're a food addict, you're food's bitch. And I don't feel like being anybody's bitch. I want to be free. I want to be my sovereign whole self. I want to exercise my autonomy and my light and my power. And you know what, guys? Addiction running my life and ruling my thoughts and taking over my actions and my choices does not align with that in any way, shape, or form. So for me to live the life that I'm living now, this spiritual, awakened, enlightened journey, I have to be clean, sober, and abstinent. So there are a whole bunch of things I don't do. I don't drink. I don't use drugs or substances. There are a whole bunch of foods I just don't eat anymore that I've removed. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about the truth about addiction and addiction healing with some scientific, neurochemical, emotional, physical, habitual information, looking at addiction from all of the perspectives so you can understand how to become free. But in this video, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the addict brain so that you guys will understand it's not your fault that you're an addict, but it is your responsibility to tame that addict brain. And if you watch the next video, you're going to understand how to do that. So I'll see you there. Bye.